Welcome to Inside New York.
That's a great question. Thank you.
Hi, this is Shaka Khan, and you're watching Inside New York.
And this year's Tony Awards is the biggest night on Broadway.
And I'm on Inside New York.
Welcome to Inside New York. I am thrilled to have back on the show the chairman of the Harlem Arts Alliance. He is also the executive producer and co-founder of New Heritage Theater and also executive producer of the Hadley Players. And he's got a great announcement coming up about the Harlem Arts Alliance Harlem Advocacy Week. We welcome back Voza Rivers. Hey, Voza.
Hey, Joan, how are you?
Okay, I was beginning to wonder whether I was ever going to see you. I'm so glad that you had a chance to break away. I know it's been, kind of traumatic for you. We're going through this pandemic, and I wanted you actually to open our series on the state of Black theater and artists surviving and creating during this crisis of a pandemic, which has now also evolved into the concerns about the racial uprising. So this conversation is long overdue, but we've got also the opportunity to share the Harlem Arts Alliance Arts Advocacy Week, which is actually a month, right?
Yes.
So that's the good news, that the Harlem Arts Alliance is still surviving and creating, and that there are theater companies that are creating even during these adverse conditions. So first and foremost, both, I wanted to ask you how you're doing and how you're making out with this pandemic.
Health-wise, I'm good. My family is good also. Let me just say that, like you mentioned, these are very challenging times. And the Harlem Arts Alliance as an arts service organization that was created in 2001, right around the time of the tragedy at the World Trade Center, where we lost thousands of individuals with a plane crash. There was a movement to find out how the arts and culture communities would also survive during that impact. Fortunately for us, a group of funders came together and really focused on arts organizations who were south of Canal Street because of where the World Trade Center was located. One of the larger art service organizations, the New York Foundation for the Arts, said, wait a minute, what happened here impacted all of New York, and in particular, we should find out what happened to the communities of color and their artists. And so we grew out of another tragic moment in the history of New York City. At our height, at our peak, we had over 750 members. So as an art service organization, we had individual artists, visual, performing, directors, choreographers, designers, technicians. We also had the institutions of higher learning, City College, Columbia University, Manhattan School of Music, and others. And we had the downtown organizations who also wanted to be a part of what was happening uptown. So you would see at a meeting, the Museum of the City of New York. We would have Lincoln Center Theater, Carnegie Hall, all of that. But what was the real centerpiece was they were coming uptown to really be introduced to Dance Theater of Harlem, Harlem School of the Arts, New Heritage Theater, National Black Theater, the work that Woody was doing. We were able to bridge the communication divide between downtown and uptown by creating this robust organization, which met once a month, where during that period we would have about 200 members talking about what they were doing and how they were surviving. So as I fast forward to where we are today and what has been happening over the years, based on systemic racism, based on the mental and health challenges that our communities have been facing, we're now down to about 300 members. And that picture is a shining picture, because the reality is to say that we have 300 members is a tribute to the longevity of being consistent about the services that we were providing as an art service organization, to counseling, to be looking for bridge funding for organizations, making sure that they had good information about health and banking, things that sustain individuals, but more importantly for organizations who might not have the leadership at the top to address those issues. Presently, we are seeing a food crisis. We are seeing high unemployment and no unemployment for artists. Arts organizations are closing their doors. When we did a unofficial survey of just calling and talking, we are seeing about 40% of the arts organizations and arts, what I call practitioners, the individual artists, 40% of them will not be around in 2021.
Well,
So
we got, now are we talking about Black theater or arts groups,
organizations,
or arts groups in general?
arts groups of color,
Okay.
and arts groups in general. It just so happens that most of the white arts groups in Harlem are either institutionalized, like the Studio Museum or the Schomburg Center. The other larger organizations, Apollo Theater, Dance Theater of Harlem, Harlem School of the Arts, are organizations, the Children's Museum, that cater to the history of Harlem, but I put them in a separate category because they are the larger cultural institutions, not like the smaller ones. And I consider my organization, that's been around now for 56 years, one of the smaller cultural institutions when you look at budget size. But
Sure.
if you also look though at the amount of work that we produce, Classical Theater of Harlem, National Black Theater, New Heritage Theater, we are producing an abundance of work. We find ways with, even in these challenging times, to be creative and to be collaborating with each other and continuing the work.
Yes.
I'm very fortunate that while we're talking about the Harlem Arts Alliance, I'm also the person who's a founding member of New Heritage Theater, which is now celebrating its 56th year.
Wow.
But there's another hat that I wear as a board member of the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce, which is a 120-year-old organization. So when you start looking at some of the institutions that I'm involved with, you will see leadership centered in Harlem, the history of Harlem being preserved. When we do Harlem Week, we reach millions of people, and Harlem Week is 46 years in existence, and I've been one of the producers since day one, 46 years ago. So for me, at the centerpiece of what I do and who I am, Harlem illuminates well within the motivation of making sure that we work together. when I talk about the challenges that we're faced with right now in reference to a lot of those individual artists are being clearly marginalized based on the fact that if they were fortunate enough to be in a play that some of the small theaters produced, that was just part of how they made their income. They may have a second or third job. Maybe they're driving a taxi. Perhaps they are a waiter or waitress in a restaurant. The opportunities for additional income is evaporated. So they are really suffering. And I take that as part of our mission of being artists and being producers, that we align ourselves with other organizations to share the plight of the individual artists, small and mid-sized arts organization that usually is at the end of any priority for funding, to say, listen, we're in a community that the reputation of arts and culture is the foundation of the reputation that is going worldwide. And so you cannot let these organizations and the people, they say boots on the ground, the individual artists that are still creating in spite of all the challenges, we have to see and find ways to assist them. So what I've done with the partnership with the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce, we started giving out food 5 days a week. We started with 500 meals a day. We're now up to 2,000 meals a day, and with a special focus on artists to come. So as of last week, we expanded to another 300 pantry food items that we will be giving out 3 days a week. All you have to do is say, I'm an artist, I need help. We have food available for them. And it's things like that that makes me feel good about being a resident of this community that I love, and I call it my beloved Harlem. And so for the rest of my colleagues who are a part of the cultural movement and who are still doing the work, we mentioned Woody King, the Dean of Black Theater. We talk about our relationships. You had Richard Wesley on, and Richard Wesley many, many years ago was also a part of the theater movement in Harlem. Those memories and that foundation, Barbara Antier is no longer here, Roger Furman is no longer here, and we can go Ernie McClintock, all of these names were theaters. There was a time where we had almost 24 theaters operating in the 60s and 70s, all in Harlem, working with each other. I long for that day to happen again, but these are different times, and so I have those memories of how we work together. And my role is to make sure through the Harlem Arts Alliance that we stay connected, that we are working together.
Wow, I tell you, Voza, I don't know how you do it all. Yeah, I know you weren't exactly on hiatus. You had your hands full. As you said, you just completed Harlem Week, which is month. That just ended, I guess, in September. We're at the beginning of October, and you're already kicking off the Harlem Arts Advocacy Week.
Month. Well, it's a month now. It started as a week,
yes,
with Inez Dickens, but there was so much, there was a proliferation of a lot of activity by our members. And because it was only a week, there was only so much, Joan, that we could do. And I just want to publicly thank you, because you embraced the mission of the Harlem Arts Alliance with your press credentials, with this show that we're on now. You were a real big supporter of those early incarnations, and you captured the history. You captured it when we honored Danny Glover coming into the community. We honored Harry Belafonte. We don't forget, we honored Gertrude Jeanette and others, because it really was important that that's the foundation, and do it while they're living, when they can smell the roses. And that's part of what the Harlem Arts Alliance has done. So we started with the week for 2 years. our members said, well, what about me? I got something on the second week of October. Somebody says, well, I got a play coming up the end of October. What about us? So we gathered, and with the board of directors, we said, you know what, let's extend this for the whole month of October, and let's market and promote activism. Who are those individuals and organizations and productions and presentations that really motivate movement?
Right.
Movement how? Movement by individuals supporting the theater. Movement by people being ombudsmen and saying, you know, I saw something so great at this little small theater, and guys, you guys should see it, and blah, 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 blah. We were committed to connecting the community with the institutions who were continuing doing the work. And again, it could not have been as successful as we were in the past without the support of journalists like yourself. So again, I want to publicly thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Voza. And I have to commend you, of course, as I always do, but particularly under these circumstances, which are so challenging. You know, when I talked to you earlier during the summer, I know you didn't even think you were going to be able to do this Arts Advocacy Month because, you know, everybody's activities had to be curtailed. So it is shocking, and I've kind of been on my heels, just trying to get out all this information that, as you mentioned, even Woody King alone, single-handedly, is doing readings all month of new works, well, works that are part of his retrospective, many of which we've never seen before. You know, there's so much going on that, you know, you can stream. I keep putting things like to be seen later, and the library, a collection, is becoming overflowing. So I think on one hand, it's really exciting, and I'm so glad that you can let our audience and viewers know about all of the wonderful activities that are going on this month. But I also want to stress, which is really the motivating push that I had to get you on the program early on when the pandemic started, you know, what the effect is going to be on the small Black community organizations, particularly theaters that can no longer do their performances. And, you know, we're now 6 months later, and some of them may be shuttered for you know, permanently. So I want to make sure that we address those that might be at risk, and also inform our viewers how they can help, or what we can do to help prevent that from happening.
Well, there are two things. Collaborations is one way, that if two groups, two organizations can get together and collaborate on a project, we understand that the platforms are different. There's no real live audience, but together we can look at Instagram, YouTube, Zoom, ways that we could be creative. The expertise is there with a lot of the videographers who might have never worked with theaters before, but now we have to come together. Audio technicians who might not have worked in theater per se, they might have been in radio or television, but they're unemployed too. And they're looking for ways to keep their craft going. And so we look for partnerships that enhance our ability to be current with the means of communication. And I am just so happy that over the last 2 months, we've been able to do virtual programming that's dealing with some of the same issues that we're discussing now. Voter registration is real hot and heavy. The census is hot and heavy, because those two things well, clearly we're talking about the, the challenges with COVID-19. If we're not paying attention to the census and voting, we're going to even be in much worse shape as we look at the future. What are we going to leave for our young people? So, again,
I'm so glad you mentioned that.
yeah.
Because
So,
that, as you know, was my focus for the month of, it was supposed to be my focus the last 3 months, but the pandemic really kind of put a, a kink in that. But yes, the vote and the census. Do you want to please address why the vote and the census is so important?
well,
I think even today, there's still people who are poo-pooing it and don't recognize its importance.
the census is so important because the population in communities are registered in a way that the kind of services that we get from the government is dependent on how many people live in particular areas. Even going further, electoral seats are governed by how many people live in a particular area. So let's look at Harlem, for example. So we know that there is East Harlem, there's Central Harlem, there's Harlem, West Harlem, there is Harlem and Inwood going up to 155th Street. All of those particular districts have different our needs, but we have to all come together by registering to make sure that we have the right representation from the city council, from the state senate, from the state assembly, and from the federal level. All of those seats and how many are determined by how many people live in a particular area. And there is a lot of misinformation about if you register, that it would be an opportunity with that kind of information. If you are an immigrant, that you will be penalized because you're here illegally. Right now, all of that is out of the, is not a priority for the government. Our goal is to get as many people as possible. So on October 3rd, last week, Saturday, I had my young people who are part of Impact Repertory Theater, which is the youth vision of New Heritage. And Impact is an acronym for a group of young people that in 1997 created this connection to New Heritage, and the acronym is I for inspiration, M for motivation, P for preparation, A for activism, C for commitment, and T for teamwork. And this group got together in mass and went into St. Nicholas Park last Saturday and started registering as many voters as they could in the park. The people in the park saw young people saying, come on, come over, we gotta register you. Did you register? It's not come on over, it's how they come over when they see young kids. And one kid is doing a poem, and another kid is doing some dance steps, and we're all coming together. So for me, that's extremely, extremely important. So that's the census.
Yes.
Now, the vote is not enough being said. We have seen on a daily basis that we have a divided Congress. And there used to be partisanship. I mean, two areas, the House of Representatives and the Senate would work together for the betterment of the community. And for the last 4 years, that has not happened. Right. And as a result of that, we're just seeing a real deterioration and frustration of citizens of this country with the proliferation of all of the backhanded, underhanded, disrespectful way that this Congress has acted against the people of this country. And so
you're talking about basically the Senate when you say the
yes,
the two.
yes. Well, but they're members of the Congress, so I'll use it in a generic sense.
Yeah, because some people will get, confused because they think, they think of the Congress as being basically the House Democrats.
House of Representatives and the Senate. So the thing is that we try and educate, and what I've done also is with another organization we have called the Coalition of Theaters of Color. Joan, you remember them well?
Yes, I wanted you to mention them.
Yeah.
Because when you talk about those small theater organizations, I believe they basically make up that group of the
well, Joan,
coalition
since you started with us many years ago with the coalition, Ozzie Davis and Ruby Dee were the regional founders, along with the 12 organizations that they had identified to create the Coalition of Theaters of Color. Today, it is a line item in the city budget, and there are now 52 organizations.
Wow,
So,
that wields a lot of.
Yes,
that should wield a lot of power when
So we're doing a town hall meeting on October 14th to address the census and also voting and the importance of voting.
And we want to remind people again of the website so they can check the calendar of all of the activities that are going on during Harlem's Arts Advocacy Week. And that website is?
HarlemAA.org.
Okay. HarlemAA.org. I think they got it.
And I want to just say thank you. Thank you for continuing to do what you do, because it's important that folks like yourself help us validate why we do what we do. And so we can't say thank you enough.
Well, folks, it's always a pleasure. And we'll look to the next event that's coming up and how we can be involved.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for joining us for this week's program of Inside New York with Voza Rivers. And you can see more of our interview on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so that you'll get an alert when it's available online. And you can always watch Inside New York every Saturday at 8:30 p.m. See you then.